We've formed the quorum. Let's get started with the meeting. Shall we invite the deputations and the administration team to join us? Agenda item 1, and that is the consultation document on method for selecting the chief executive by universal suffrage. There are two papers. One is the declaration by the government, and the other one is the background brief prepared by the Secretariat. Today, we have altogether 222 deputations and individuals attending the meeting. There are six sessions today. It will be relatively long, so please bear with us.
Hi, 早晨各位
Good morning, deputations and individuals. First of all, welcome to the special meeting of the Constitutional Affairs Panel, and the meeting today is to listen to your views on the consultation document on selecting the chief executive by universal suffrage in 2017. I will be asking you to speak one by one. You will get 3 minutes. When the time is up, there will be a timer giving out beeping sound, and when you hear that, please stop speaking. Now, if you have written submission, please pass it on to us, and the Secretariat will then pass them over to the members of this panel. Now, I would like to remind you that when you speak or when you make your written submissions, you do not enjoy the protection or exemption under the Legislative's Powers and Privileges Ordinance. So when you speak, please speak close to the mic so that we can hear you more clearly. And if you would like to tune into the simultaneous interpretation, please put on your earpiece. Cantonese, English, and Putonghua versions are available. I would also like to remind you that we have given you a note for members of the public. Please pay attention to that, and after you have spoken, then I would be asking the Undersecretary for Constitution and Mainland Affairs, Mr. Lau Kongwa, to make a brief response. And then I'll open the floor to questioning by members. And of course, the timing for that will depend on our overall timetable. So this session will end at 10:35. We have a tight timetable today, so please cooperate. The first one is Mr. Ko Hugh Wing. Thank you, Chairman. Ko Hugh Wing from Co-Clansmen Association. First of all, we agree that universal suffrage or political reform should be based on the basic law, and having universal suffrage for selection in the CE is a common wish of the CPG and Hong Kong people. We need a legal basis for doing that, and so we should do that within the framework of the basic law. Second, we suggest that the nominating committee, NC, can try to incorporate more young people in the different subsectors. Young people are a pillar of our society, and in this society there have been voices that there should be a youth subsector in the nominating committee to enhance young people's participation and the mandate of the NC. The silent young people are one part of the silent majority, and we want to gauge their views. We want to increase the mandate of the NC by doing that as well, and we hope to provide more a platform for young people to express their views. Young people should be those aged 18 to 45. So when we set up this youth subsector, we should have due regard to balanced participation. And for the four major sectors, for the first sector, we should have young businessmen subsector or young professional subsector. For example, the Young Persons Trade Association. Second, I hope that there should be a subsector for tertiary students. And third sector, we can add in the uniformed groups and other community bodies. And the fourth sector, we can add in young politicians and young people from political parties. Now, we have heard different views when we discuss the political reform. I think we should make a step forward, and we should try to implement one man, one vote. Young people are not enemies in our society. They have passion. They are concerned about social affairs. They have ideals, and most of the young people have a pragmatic attitude, and we should provide them with a platform for them to participate and give their views. And well, we all have aspirations in our life, and I think this is something the political reform should have due regard on, and we hope that the government and various sectors can have regard to my views. The next one, Mr. Yip Chung Ching. Good morning. Chairman and members have submitted my written submission. We have aspired for universal suffrage for returning the CE for many years. So I urge our honourable members to consider Hong Kong's reality. We should seek common grounds, and we should have universal suffrage for CE in 2017. And we hope to have direct election for electrical in 2020. We should have a pragmatic approach, and we should have due regard to the principle of orderly and gradual progress. And we want to have stability in Hong Kong. We want to have development in Hong Kong. And we should be responsible in the way forward, and we should endorse this proposal for having universal suffrage for CE in 2017 so that we can make advances in our constitutional development, and we can have the ultimate goal of returning electoral members by direct election. Now, if we stand still, then the society will be torn further apart. And some electoral members have staged non-cooperation movement, and the bringing the operation of the electrical to a standstill, and it's becoming more difficult to govern Hong Kong. And the people's livelihood is affected. We should, and we stand a little chance of having direct elections for electrical in 2020. So members, please seek common grounds and respect differences and endorse the current proposals. And on these proposals, I have made several suggestions: nominating committee composition and formation method. I think we should follow the four sectors, 38 subsectors for the existing EC, and the number of the different members of the different subsectors, and the electoral base should remain unchanged. Nominating committee. So nomination should be made, and one NC member should only nominate one person, and there should not be any limit on the number. And a candidate should only be able to get endorsement from 150 NC members. We should enhance the transparency of the nominating procedure. The candidates should explain their manifestos to everyone in Hong Kong. Nomination procedures. Secret ballot should be used. One person, two vote approach should be adopted. Thank you. Next one, Mr. Yim Kin Peng. Thank you, Chairman. In 2014, Hong Kong has experienced the fierce debate, and there have been many marches, demonstrations, and there is a illegal occupation of the roads for 79 days. So the Hong Kong society is torn apart, and Hong Kong has to pay a high price as a whole for this. We should seize hold of the present opportunity, and we should uphold stability in Hong Kong. We should be implementing universal suffrage for CE election under the Basic Law and the 831 NPCNC decision. That would represent a major stride in Hong Kong's democratic development, and we should not stand still.
Right now, the views in our society are rather polarized. Some people insist that they wouldn't accept the 31st August decision by the NPCSC, and they ask for everything to be restarted. And some people raise the civic nomination proposal, which is against basic law, and the sad ending of Occupy Central means that these people's views are not the majority. If they do not give in, or if they persist to promote Hong Kong independence, they would hamper national safety, and not only will they not able to fight for democracy, they will hurt the welfare of Hong Kong. We believe that implementing universal suffrage of the CE is the collective wish of the central government and the Hong Kong government, and we support the Hong Kong government's decision to launch a second-round consultation, and we have submitted specific recommendations to the Legislative Council, and I have the following recommendations. First, the subsectors the composition of the nominating committee can stay the same, and we should have we propose 2 rounds of in the process, including members' nomination and committee nomination, and the term of the nominating committee should remain at 5 years, so that any by-elections required will be can be facilitated, and in case the candidate is not appointed by the central government, the nominating process will be restarted, and the existing chief executive election ordinance has to be amended to provide for such re-election arrangements, and the candidates should be vetted and satisfy certain requirements, and they have to be living in Hong Kong for 10 years, and they must not have foreign citizenships. They must be loyal to the central government in Hong Kong, and they should fulfill duties of Chinese citizen. Next, Mr. K. Kawa. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members, friends. I'm very happy to be here speaking on behalf of the Hong Kong Association for Promotion of Peaceful Unification of China Limited, and I have certain views on the universal suffrage of the chief executive. And last year we experienced an 18-day Occupy Central movement, and it had grave impact on Hong Kong. And if we depart from the rule of law in return for democracy, it would hamper order of the society, our economy, as well as our law enforcement environment. And the universal suffrage of the Hong Kong chief executive does not only have to do with Hong Kong, but also national safety and mainland development. We reiterate that any proposals on Hong Kong's constitutional development must be based on the framework of the Basic Law and the NPCSC decision. And we also have to consider Hong Kong's social developments and the demands of the public before we can expedite the development of Hong Kong's democracy. And on the composition and forming method of the nominating committee, since our past practice seems to be rather effective in order to avoid controversies, we recommend following the decision of the NPCSC on the 31st of October, and In other words, we should have 38 subsectors and 1,200 members. And on the nomination procedure of the chief executive candidate by the nominating committee, in order to enhance the recognition and legitimacy of the nominating committee, we recommend the process to have 3 phases. The first is members' nomination, and the second, if we have more than 3 persons who wish to take part, the 1,200 members would cast 3 votes each, and the first 3 persons would enter the next phase. And persons who if we only have 2 or 3 persons who receive 100 votes or more, this phase can be omitted. And the third phase is committee nomination. In other words, the 1,200 members would conduct voting on the 2 or 3 candidates one by one, and those who receive more than half the votes can become official CE candidates. And on the voting arrangements, we recommend a 2-round voting system. In the first round, if if nobody receives over 50% of valid votes, the 2 highest candidates can enter the second round, and the candidates with the most votes in the second round will become the CE elect. Mr. Wong Wai Tat, I'm very happy to be able to speak today, and I have certain views on the universal suffrage, and hopefully my views can contribute. The 79-day Occupy Central movement has great impact on Hong Kong. And I support selecting the CE by universal suffrage in 2017 based on the NPCSC decision. As I mentioned, Occupy Central costs us 2 months of time, and there's very little time left for public consultation. It's very difficult to reach a consensus at this juncture. I recommend us not to waste further time on discussing meaningless issues. The electorate base and method and the voting method should remain the same, and this is the most pragmatic method. Me and my friends are against organizational nomination, civic nomination, etc., because these proposals are against the basic law. And the rule of Hong Kong is something Hong Kong people are most proud of. One day, if everyone stands against the law, what will Hong Kong become? So we have to defend the basic law, and as such, we oppose to these proposals. And for the voting threshold, most Hong Kong people would not have a great desire to vote, so we shouldn't set a minimum voting threshold. Right now, we should discuss the nomination threshold, the voting process, and the forming method of the candidates. These key parts or key points we have to discuss in the second round of the consultation, and everyone has to work hard towards universal suffrage. It's been 17 years since the handover, and we are just one step away from the universal suffrage of the CEE. Hopefully, we can make use of our opportunities to speak out according to the basic law. If we have no universal suffrage of the CEE by 2017, we cannot have direct election of the Legislative Council by 2020, and as such, we will be going nowhere, and everyone will lose. Mr. Lai Kwok Chiu. Good morning, Chairman, members. I think Hong Kong should have universal suffrage of the CE in 2017. If we have no universal suffrage, Hong Kong's democracy development will stall, and the collective wish of the public will not be realized. We should adopt an orderly progress in developing democracy. If we fail to have universal suffrage of the CE by 2017, we cannot have direct election of the Legislature by 2020, and that is if we negate the universal suffrage proposal, Hong Kong will face further political struggles, and Hong Kong's business environment will also be affected, as well as the rule of law. And this would be detrimental to Hong Kong's development. So implementing universal suffrage of the Chief Executive by 2017, only with that implemented, we can focus our energies on further promoting democracy. This is for the general interest of Hong Kong. I hope some people can put their personal interests aside and be bold in promoting universal suffrage of the Chief Executive in 2017. And in terms of composition of the nominating committee, we have the following suggestions. We should have 1,200 members, and we should have four sectors and 300 members each. And we should adopt a balanced participation approach. And the existing approach has been in use for quite some years, and most people in Hong Kong are rather familiar with it, so we should stick with it. And in terms of the formula for choosing the CEE candidates, and people who receive at least 100 nominations can become a candidate. And as such, we can provide more options to the public and members, and each member can only nominate one person. And these members can cast at most three votes to 3 separate persons, and as such, we can allow more options for the nominating committee. And this way, we can choose the most legitimate candidates, and the 2 or 3 persons with the most votes or nominations can become official candidates. And the voting method of the CEE, we should use a first past the vote voting method, and this is easiest to comprehend and the cost is lowest, and this is commonly used in many countries. Mr. Fan Yingming. Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to be speaking on behalf of the Hong Kong Association of Construction Professionals to speak on the universal suffrage. And the second round consultation is on its way, but we still face a lot of composition views, and their proposals are rather deviate a lot from the MPCSC decision. I'm quite sure the people who oppose to the plan will fail, and I'm confident that the central government will execute the decision by MPCSC. I urge everyone to give up all impractical proposals and work towards a common goal. We recommend the government to stipulate that we can further discuss on the constitutional system in the future. And for instance, the number of candidates can be increased from 2 to 3 to 3 or 4. And we propose increasing the number of members in nominating committee. We should introduce more young people, students, and women. We don't suggest cancelling functional constituencies in favor of accepting this universal suffrage proposal. At the same time, we propose increasing the number of groups, and if we implement universal suffrage of the sea by 2017, then we can have direct election at the Legislative Council by 2020, and as such we can enhance the legitimacy of the government. Let's look at the big picture and come up with win-win solutions. If the universal suffrage is implemented, it will be the biggest achievement since the handover, and it's also the collective wish of the central government and the Hong Kong public. I understand the central government's commitment to promoting universal suffrage, and I support the government's decision to go ahead with the second round consultation and implementing this CE's universal suffrage by 2017. Mr. Tam Kin Cheng. I have some views on the method of selecting the CE by universal suffrage, and I have a rather unique view. Hong Kong is rather divided, and that's because everyone has a chance to vote. from what we can see in the previous two CEs as well as Mr. C.Y. Leung, these CEs were chosen by a small group of people. We should refer to what Hong Kong did during the colonial times and have the central government appoint the chief executive. For Hong Kong people, the most important thing is to live a prosperous and comfortable life. 17 years after the handover, you can see our living quality. The poor are getting poorer and the rich are getting richer.
Well, as an ordinary member of the public, and I can say that life is getting more difficult for me. Now, the political bickering comes from a small circle election, no matter what the number is, 1,200, 1,600, well, it would only further divide the society. Shouldn't we go back and adopt the older approach? When we talk about seize the opportunity, what kind of opportunity are we talking about? Now, let's not create further trouble. Well, we should not put up a show. I and my friends are suggesting this. Let's adopt the old approach, past practice. And some people were in favor of the British government, and they said that they were able to provide a good life for us. So we don't necessarily have one man, one vote. Well, under the present system, well, if the CE is doing poorly, there's nothing we can do. Well, not even the Legco can have a way of impeaching him, and the CPG will be supporting whoever it recommends. So we feel quite helpless here. Ms. Kuan Wing Yi, the consultation document was drafted based on the NPCSA decision. The first round will be candidates will be nominated by 1,200 members. All of them NC members are people who swear allegiance to Leung Chun-ying. They earn a high income, and so the Universal Suffrage will be scored towards the rich and the powerful, and it will be just a waste of time. And people say that we may pocket the proposal first. Well, it's been 17 years since the handover. We can wait no longer. We are buying more expensive water from Dongjiang River, and for the XRL, the government would favor an option which is less costly, but then is really destroying the homes of the Chaoyuan village, and the government is building luxurious apartments all over Hong Kong, pushing up further the property prices, and people have difficulty owning their own flats. The SRG told the young people, don't give up, and when you get married, you don't necessarily have to own a flat. Wow, if C.Y. Leung, you have an illness, can I ask you not to seek consultation with the doctor? On the 21st of October, 2014, Carrie Lam met with the students saying that the basic law cannot be changed. Well, I think the MPs and the NPCSC has every right to interpret the basic law, and Annex 1, Provision 7 has been interpreted many times. And if the CE as election method has to be changed, it has to be endorsed by 2/3 majority of Legco members, endorsed by the CE, and reported to the NPCSC. That's the interpretation of 2004, and the CE must make a report to the NPCSC for it to decide whether there should be a change in the election method of CE. And the government can only introduce changes after the NPCSC, and then the 3-step process has turned into a 5-step process. And on 31st of August, the NBCSE made a decision which is so very different from the 2004 decision. Now, several days ago, Rimsky-Yun said that he would reflect it to the CBG the proposal of using the blank vote as the last line of defense. I think this is bullshit. I can't select among the 3 candidates proposed, and I'm forced to cast a blank vote. And if we do that, then there will be a temporary CE to be elected first. I want real universal suffrage. I don't get it. Mr. Mui Xiufeng. Thank you, Chairman and members. Today I'm very happy to see that many pro-establishment camp members are here. And I'm heartbroken that no pan-Democrat members is here. And I'm happy that no one is falling asleep. The CE's legitimacy is much enhanced if we can have one man, one vote. And the CPG will give us even more freedom of speech if we have universal suffrage. If the CE swears allegiance to the basic law, then we can avoid having independence of Hong Kong. And people in Hong Kong want to get married, but they don't have that ability. And then they want to establish a uniformed group, and they are even afraid of a young people's uniformed group. If we don't have universal suffrage for CE, we won't have universal suffrage for the LegCo. So I hope that we can really implement universal suffrage for CE in 2017. I do want to see universal suffrage for LegCo. I don't want to see filibustering day after day, as what we are seeing today. The Democrats claimed that they want to build a democratic society, but then they are using a feudalistic approach. They're not heeding any public views. I thought some pan-Democrats would be here, but ultimately they didn't show up. I think the one who should do consultation is not the government, but rather the pan-Democrats. They should listen to views of the members of the public, how much we want to have universal suffrage. Earlier, Mr. Lau said that if we have the right to vote, then that's already genuine universal suffrage. And if not, then it's just a fake universal suffrage. So those who would like to have a fake universal suffrage, please take heed of our views. I speak for many young people in Hong Kong. I want to tell the government that we want to have universal suffrage in 2017. Mr. Ng, Alex Ng. Good morning, Chairman members. My suggestions are as follows. We should have the nominating committee modeled after the existing EC with 4 sectors with minimal changes. Nomination of candidates. The candidates should have the recommendations from 150 NC members. And then we can have as many candidates as possible. Then there will be many more choices. Voting. One man, one vote. A system should be adopted, and the first past the post system should be adopted. That's a simple approach to take. And that would not be the ultimate scheme, but this is part of the process to have universal suffrage. We should abide by the principle of gradual and orderly approach, and we should not achieve everything in one step. Well, if we go by that route, we would not be having universal suffrage or one vote. 2017 election is part of the democratic process, and we can make further enhancements in the future to achieve the ultimate goal of universal suffrage. Thank you. Mr. Lai Chi-man. Thank you, Chairman. And members, good morning. My opinions have been outlined in my written submission to the LegCo. I will not recite them in detail. I would just like to share a few points. Hong Kong has developed from a fishing village into an international metropolis over the years, and still Hong Kong people have been striving hard, and we have been law-abiding. And these are the core values that we've been upholding, driving our development. And behind this success is we have rule of law, a very efficient government, and law-abiding citizens. And after the handover, the basic law has become the most important constitutional basis for Hong Kong. And I think we should respect this system, and we should formulate a proposal for enacting C under the basic law. I think this is the most democratic and reasonable approach. The basic law stipulates the CE's functions, and the Article 45 has stipulated clearly the CE election. So I think we should respect the rule of law, and we should abide by the provisions of the basic law, and we should adopt the 5-step process to have universal suffrage for CE in 2017. As for details not laid out in the basic law, they can be considered if they don't breach the 5-step approach, and we should adopt a orderly and gradual progress approach. And I think it's important that we take the first step. LegCo members, you are obliged to endorse this proposal. I would like to thank members who are here. And I don't understand why those who have been opposing the proposal are not attending this public hearing, or they leave in the middle, and they are not here to listen to us. Now, the time frame is rather tight, and what I want to say is that we should take the first step as soon as we can, and I trust in the central authorities undertaking to us. This is not the ultimate scheme, I believe, and we can make further enhancements based on the law. Well, we can't achieve something perfect at one go. Ms. Chen Hao Lee, please switch on your mic. Please hang on for a second. No, not yet ready. Yes. Okay. Good morning, Chairman, members. On the 2017 CE election and formation method for LegCo in 2016, I have the following views. The NC should be formed based on the existing EC with 4 sectors. The number of members should be retained at 1,200, with each sector 300 people. There should be 38 subsectors. There should be balanced participation from the 4 sectors in the nomination of the CE candidates. The first step is that those seeking nomination should be recommended by 1/8 of the members of the nominating committee. Second step, and in the 4 sectors, the candidate should get at least 100 nominations, and there should not be more than 3 candidates. And there should be a 2-round voting system for electing the CE. Everyone should get 1 vote, and the candidate who gets more than half of the votes will get elected. In the first round, if there is no candidate obtaining over half of the votes, and the two with the highest votes will then enter the second round. Now, when there is only one candidate, we should still cast our votes, and that candidate must obtain more support votes and objection votes before they get elected. Under universal suffrage, that it is possible to elect a CE who doesn't love the country and love Hong Kong. So I believe that we should have the proper appointment system from the CPG, and also the Hong Kong SLG should enact local legislation to set out clearly the arrangements or re-election arrangements when the CE elect is not appointed by the CPG. Now, we should concentrate our efforts in making the best arrangement for CE election in 2017, and we should not make major amendments to the electoral formation method in 2016. But then we can still make certain adjustments on the demarcation of the constituencies so that we can avoid the situation where people with few votes can get elected as electoral members. Well, so much. Thank you very much.
Next, Ms. Lau Kong Hong. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman, members. And personally, on the consultation on the method for selecting the Chief Executive, I agree with the government's recommendation on the constitutional basis and principles. And I also agree with the third chapter of the consultation document on the interpretation of the basic law and the NPCSC decision, and I have the following views. I have two main points to make. First, it's the principles of designing the universal suffrage system of the chief executive. First, it's the political principles. Those who stand against the central government cannot become the chief executive. When you look at any country in the world or any political system, none of them would accept none of them will accept a local government standing against the central government. That's a basic political principle. And second, we have to follow the basic law and the decision by the NPCSC as we implement universal suffrage of the CEE, and we have to solve two problems. First is the organizational nomination, and second is a election system in the universal suffrage phase of the whole territory. And I recommend the following proposals. First, the composition forming method of the nominating committee should remain the same. And second, the nomination process should be divided into two phases. In the first phase, those who receive 1/8 of the recommendations of the NC members can become a candidate. And step two, around three candidates would be formed by the nominating committee. And in the voting phase, we should adopt a first-past-the-post method. And fourth, in order to deal with the situation in which the CE elect is not appointed by the central government, Hong Kong has to amend its legislation to incorporate a re-election mechanism. And fifth, in order for the CE to be broadly representative of Hong Kong's interests, we should retain the requirement that the CE must not have political backgrounds. And sixth, universal suffrage of the CE is for the benefit of Hong Kong, so we have to focus our energies on universal suffrage, and as such we shouldn't make substantial changes to the forming method of the 2016 Legislative Council. And Mr. Ao Pak Ching, good morning. I'm a school principal as well as a barrister, and I'm also a justice of peace, and I'd like to offer my personal views today. I already submitted a written submission, so I do not want to repeat myself. I support a one-person, one-vote of the Chief Executive by 2017 based on the NPCSC decision. First of all, we should respect the law, including the law of China. As a JP, peace and prosperity is the most important for most people, and we should educate our future generation on becoming a responsible citizen. Hong Kong is very divided nowadays, and our core values are basically gone, and the rule of law is continually being compromised. So I think a gradual and orderly manner that's in the interest of the public. I think we should accept such a proposal. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chris, I'm from the Power for Democracy. Last year, we faced a territory-wide Occupy movement, which showed our wish for real universal suffrage. And by real universal suffrage, we should have a fair election system for selecting the chief executive and forming the Legislative Council. Without a real democratic system, we would not have an accountable government. And the Hong Kong government ignored the basic law and the Sino-British Declaration, and it's trying to implement constitutional reform based on the MPCSC's decision. The government is not accountable, and despite the fact that the basic law is against the ICCPR, it still decided to ignore the public wish in implementing political reform. And our view at Power for Democracy is for the government to revoke the MPCSC decision and restart the five-step process, and it should listen to the public and establish a democratic system that Hong Kong people want. If the Hong Kong government continues to ignore its constitutional responsibilities, as mentioned by a famous U.S. economist, if we lose democracy, we will lose it forever, and the Legislative Council has no other choice. We should negate the proposal of a false universal suffrage. Mr. Wong Chor-fung, good morning, Chairman and deputations. Any political reform must be done based on the Constitution. And as Hong Kong moves forward with political reform, it cannot deviate from the constitutional requirements of the Basic Law. And in 2007, the MPC ruled that Hong Kong can have chief executive universal suffrage of the sea by 2017. But whether this can be implemented depends on whether 2/3 of the votes can be secured at the LegCo. And Hong Kong people can decide for themselves. I understand that some people have their own wishes, but to propose any plans that have no legal or constitutional basis would not help the matter, and they would only hurt the trust between Hong Kong people and the central government and compromise Hong Kong's democratic development. I'm sure that most people in Hong Kong wish to be able to cast a vote for the chief executive by 2017, even with the nomination process. Due to competition, the process will induce big changes in the society, and the candidates would have to face the public and respond to their questions. And as such, the government will also be held more accountable for the public. So it's better to have universal suffrage than not have it, and it has a lot of benefits to our society. As long as Hong Kong is willing to make this important first step, we still have room to further refine the process. So I hope the Legislative Council can give Hong Kong people a chance to vote for the Chief Executive. Mr. Chen Choi-hei. Good morning, Chairman, members, Mr. Lau. On the consultation document, we have three main principles. The election method must align with the Basic Law as well as the MPCSC decision on the 31st August, and the composition of the nominating committee should fulfill a balanced participation principle. And the election system should avoid constitutional crisis due to the fact that the CE-elect is not appointed by the central government. And based on the MPCSC decision, we should introduce more competition and public participation in the process. And on the composition and forming method of the nominating committee, in terms of the number of members, we should retain it at 1,200. And for the composition of the committee, we should retain the 4 sectors. And each sector should have 300 members. And that's also derived from the MPCSC decision. And on the subsectors, we should retain the existing arrangement as well of 38 subsectors. We shouldn't make any adjustments. And this is in line with the principles of the Basic Law. And the committee should also be broadly representative. And as such, we should not adjust the number of subsectors. And the number of members of the sectors should remain the same. Again, this is in line with the MPCSC decision. And on the forming method of the sectors and the electorate base, we should retain the 38 subsectors and the existing electorate base, and the election committee establish these arrangements based on the Basic Law. And our existing electorate base and forming method have been in operation for years, and this is something the public is very familiar with. If we introduce big changes, it will be controversial, and it would hamper the implementation of the universal suffrage in 2017. And we have 2 phases to the nomination process, including members' nomination and committee nomination. And during members' nomination, those who receive 120 joint nominations can become official candidates. Mr. Yip Wing. Thank you, Chairman. A lot of deputations today have praised the National People's Congress, but according to the Constitution of the PRC, Article 2, Cap 34, all Chinese citizens aged 18 or above, regardless of their nationality, ethnicity, gender, family background, occupation, religious stance, education, wealth level, etc., they would all have the chance to vote and be voted for. And according to, apart from people who are deprived of political rights from the law, and in other words, the MPC seems to be above the law. The government is asking us to take it on board first, and it's asking us to seize the opportunity. So why do we want false universal suffrage? People say the 1,200-person nominating committee is already broadly representative, but in those 1,200 people, do we have any persons with disabilities? We have 578,000 PWDs in Hong Kong, which represents 8.1% of our population. Within the 1,200 NC members, how many of them can represent the PWDs? Do these members know what PWDs need? Chairman, without social welfare, how can we have democracy? A lot of Hong Kong people occupy 3 areas in Hong Kong: Admiralty, Mong Kok, and Causeway Bay, and still the government refused to answer the public's calls, and it merely played a numbers game, and it even used it adopted political crackdowns. And today I could not even bring an orange into this chamber, and the and the government is relying on the views of the central government in order to please the mainland governments. It's sabotaging its own interests. In other words, it's giving up on the one country, two systems approach, and they compromise the benefits of Hong Kong. In the last, Mr. Chiu, in the last 10 years, we saw a lot of errors in the administration, and the government is really reaching a crisis.
Its popularity rating is very low, and it stems that the government doesn't have the necessary legitimacy. No matter what ratification measures it takes, it can't. It is still trapped in the fact that it is not legitimate enough. And we have the nominating committee, which elects the CE, but then they are not being monitored by the Hong Kong people. This special class enjoys political rights, and the government needs only to ingratiate this privileged group, and then it can carry on with whatever it likes. What the public sees is that the policy is good towards the rich, and the rich gets richer, the poor gets poorer. This is most ridiculous. This is a root of all kinds of livelihood problems here in Hong Kong. The property prices are exorbitant. Young people cannot move upward socially. All these have to do with the fact that we can't have universal suffrage for the CE. The SRG should reflect Hong Kong people's aspirations and determination to have universal suffrage with CE to the CPG. But what we are seeing today is the other way around, and the SRG is just ingratiating the CPG, asking Hong Kong people to obey the CPG. This is most outrageous and ridiculous, and Hong Kong's development has also become stagnated because of this, and this political sort of risk are going to be snowballing, and well, something big may happen in the future. The CPG has reneged on its promise on one country, two systems. In this electrical, we see that a lot of people are saying that we should respect the NPCSC decision. It has promised us universal suffrage. But based on the past records, I would not trust the CPG in giving true universal suffrage for us. What they're asking is to have absolute power over us, and this is going against democracy, and it doesn't help address our grievances. Mr. Chu Shi-chun. Good morning. I live in Hong Kong, an ordinary member of the public. I'm not a headmaster. I'm not a barrister or justice of peace. Mr. Mui said that he represents a number of young people, but for the young people in this room, we have raised our own views, and you are not here to represent us. Mr. Lai also mentioned that we should trust the CPG's promise, and then I will share with you why we can't do that. A few days ago, I staged a consultation session meeting in Hong Kong, and the residents asked me to come to this public hearing to object to this proposal or suggestion that we should settle now for the current proposal. I would like to raise the point of the baby formula. 7 days ago, a 5-year-old kid asked me, he asked me, he mistook me as the CE, and he asked me, what should I eat after I grow up? Is there enough of baby formula here in Hong Kong? I said to him jokingly, because the CPG, or the residents in mainland, were pocketing the baby formula in Hong Kong and then bring them all back to the mainland. for any ordinary baby formula, a child can grow healthy after drinking it. But for the baby formula in mainland, children will develop all kinds of diseases like kidney stones and so on. And substandard baby formula should not be consumed at all because it does all sorts of harm to your health. So fake universal suffrage does the same to Hong Kong. Let me cite another example. Substandard eggs and good eggs. The substandard eggs the egg yolk is made up of all kinds of synthetic materials and chemicals. Well, similarly, for fake universal suffrage, there is no genuine nomination right. There is just the voting right. Well, they just have a good cover, but then it's not really genuine universal suffrage. I used to work in a bank. I want to talk about credit amount. If a customer doesn't have good record, he will be blacklisted by the bank. The CPG has been reneging on its promise to Hong Kong people. It's exhausted its credit limit. If they don't repay the loan to us, we can't trust it on its promise. Ms. Maxine Yao, Mr. Tam, Mr. Lau, and members. I am from the Hong Kong Professionals and Senior Executives Association. Our association hopes that we can have universal suffrage for the CE election in 2017. The proposal should be based on the Basic Law and the MPCSC decision on the number. We agree that there would be 38 subsectors, a number of NC members, 1,200 members. The association agrees that there should be a joint recommendation of 120 people before they can get recommended, and each candidate should only get at most 150 recommendations so that more people can get recommended and more choices can be provided to people. Association also suggests that the candidates should introduce an election manifesto to the NC and also to the public through mass media. The association recommends that there should be 2 to 3 candidates, and there should be a secret ballot, and every NC member can cast 1 to 3 votes. And those candidates, or the 3 candidates who get the most nominations from the NC, will become the official candidates. And if there are only 2 candidates, then the NC can just nominate these 2 candidates. Now, in the first round, if there is only 1 candidate who gets more than half of the votes from the NC members, and there will be he will become the official candidate. In the second round of voting, the 2 candidates who get the most votes can become the candidates. Now, if in the second round there is only 1 candidate who has obtained more than half of the votes, then he will become the official candidate. And if in any one round of voting nobody gets more than half of the NC members' votes, the one with the least votes will be phased out, eliminated, and then the voting will begin again for the remaining candidates until 2 to 3 official candidates with more than half of the votes are produced. We should have the election registration system, and I think if we have 1 man 1 vote, then the CE will be enjoying legitimacy. Well, the deputations have spoken. So please, Mr. Lau, your brief response. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, deputations and individuals for coming here today to give your views. And many have spoken about the increase in the number of subsectors and also nomination procedures, nomination method, and also tenure of the nominating committee and so on. You have made detailed suggestions. I've noted them all down. And some have said that they don't want our work to stand still. We want to seek common grounds and respect individual differences. Well, this is also the aspiration of the government. We are now in the consultation period. And after the consultation, we would be presenting a resolution for scrutiny and vetting by the LegCo. And we hope that the LegCo members can endorse this constitutional reform package so that the 5 million eligible voters can have one vote, and we can take a great stride forwards. I think that's much good to Hong Kong's political landscape, and it brings all kinds of benefits to Hong Kong's governance. And some friends have also referred to the rule of law. Many of you here cherish the rule of law in Hong Kong. This is our core value. We are worried that it will be compromised or undermined, and at the same time we see that any democratic system should be built on a very solid system of the rule of law, and the basic law and the MPCSC decision provide a solid foundation for us to take the things forward, and we want to make a step forward. Some talked about the 5-step process. MPCSC's decision is founded on some good constitutional basis. And in fact, under the one country, two systems, Hong Kong is not a political or independent entity. We are just a special administrative region. And we need participation of the CPG, SARG, and LegCo members to take part in this reform proposal. And that is very important. In fact, after the handover, we have launched 2 constitutional development reforms. One is successful, the other fails. And the one which failed, we stopped at the third step. And for the last round, we've gone through all the 5 steps, and that's it. So that's so much for my response. So I would now like to hear from members. Members, you can ask your questions. 2 have already raised their hands. Any other member? And then I would give you the order. Dr. Priscilla Leung, Mr. Paul Chair, and Mr. Lee Shak Yan. Any other member? If not, then 4 minutes each. Dr. Priscilla Leung. First of all, I would like to pose a question to Mr. Yip Chung Ching. You talked about one man, 2 votes, a secret ballot among the NC members. How come that you suggest 2 instead of 3 votes? Because we're talking about 2 to 3 candidates. And my next question is for Mr. Tam Keen Kay. I think he is sharing his true thoughts with us. Some people have asked the LegCo members to veto the proposal, and very often they say that they are very hopeless. We don't have any choices, so we must vote it down. But Hong Kong has been through a lot, and Hong Kong people they would never be hopeless. Now, if we don't take a step forward, how can we travel further? Now, well, taking by the experience of 2005 and also 2010, now if you look at what happened in 2005, if we endorsed the proposal back then we would have been even achieving a lot in 2010. So if you understand more about politics and the operation of one country, two systems, then you would come up with that kind of conclusion. You feel disappointed, and a lot of young people said that true universal suffrage can resolve all problems. Now, if you are a mature person, you would know that this is impossible. Well, in many new democratic countries, they are facing problems even during a democratic system. So we've had many views when we go down to the street. A lot of people would like us to make a step forward. Of course, it's not perfect. It isn't perfect. But if you don't take the step forward, then you will still be standing still forever. And the relationship between the CPG and SLG is bound to deteriorate, and it would not do any good in our efforts to improve livelihood in Hong Kong. So when so many Hong Kong people would like to step forward, to make a step forward, and accept this interim proposal, so to speak. Well, I understand this is not the ultimate scheme, and you can never say that things will further develop after 2017. And if the 2017 proves successful, we can take even further steps thereafter. So these are the questions I would like to pose to the two deputations or individuals.
1 minute each, please. Thank you, Chairman, and Dr. Priscilla Leung. My suggestion was to respond to the consultation document, and I propose 2 votes for each person because I grew up in Hong Kong. I've been in Hong Kong for more than 50 years. I saw that in the last few years, as a Hong Kong citizen, I'm very sad to see that our prestigious legislators did not do their jobs, and they did not act in the interests of our interests, and they've been filibustering, and they have dragged on for many social welfare and infrastructure topics, which led to increase in costs. So my suggestion was really based on efficiency and cost effectiveness. Mr. Paul Chair, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. Since time is limited, I wouldn't such a long question, so I'd like to share my views instead. One of the friends mentioned Article 34 of the Constitution of the People's Republic of China. Mr. Yip Wing, if I'm correct. I have a question for Mr. Yip. And the article says that the citizens, Chinese citizens aged 18 or above. And this is a deviation from the basic law requirement that the CE candidate must be aged 40 or above. And Article 44 of the Basic Law says that the candidates must live in Hong Kong for at least 10 years. So we see we see that the Basic Law stipulations are against the Constitution. In some cases, the candidates might satisfy the requirements, but in effect they would not win the election. And under Article 34, regardless of family background, financial status, etc., in any election system, we would not prohibit any bankrupt persons or uneducated persons to again standing for the election. I'm not against these persons whatsoever, but this is the reality. In theory, there's no requirement on education attainment, but in reality, we all know that such candidates stand very little chance of being elected. And the same goes for unemployed people. We have a 1,200-member nominating or nomination process, on the surface, it looks fair. And based on past practice or the past electorate basis, the majority of the 1,200 members would be rather conservative, and it seems that candidates who are more conservative or those who love Hong Kong and love China can enter the gates. And as such, pan-democrats would not be voted by these 1,200 people, and by the same token, bankrupt people or uneducated people would not receive these votes. Why didn't anyone complain against an unfair voting system? Some people are explicitly excluded from standing for the election, and we have another group of people who are, in theory, can participate, but from our experience and by common sense, they wouldn't be able to enter the gate. So the real impartiality of this system is for the second group. And some people might be able to persuade these 1,200 members for support. The system itself is neutral, and I just want to point out that the system might seem unfair because of the views of certain people. Mr. Lee Chok-yan, I heard two very wrong points. First is by Dr. Priscilla Leung. And what she meant is that democracy is useless. It cannot improve our welfare. Based on her logic, we shouldn't even abolish the emperor system in ancient China. I think perhaps Mr. Tam can respond to that. And Paul Chair said the pan-democrats should try to garner support from those 1,200 members. Why is that? Why do those 1,200 members have privileges? The point is that they shouldn't have special privileges. If they do have privileges, why are 1/4 of them from business, 1/4 from industry, commercial, and financial sectors, etc.? You seem to be saying that everyone in Hong Kong must be controlled by those 1,200 members. I'm not sure why Paul Chair came up with such views. And I have some questions for Mr. Au. I heard that he's a school principal and barrister. And some people said that the MPCSC decision or the basic law are the ultimate basis. Under the basic law, there's a 3-step process, and it was expanded into a 5-step process in 2004. And in the 5th step, only the MPCSC has the right to decide whether to amend it. And based on the 31st August decision, the MPCSC seemed to have the right to the ultimate right, and they seem to be ever increasing their control. So by the same logic, why don't the MPCSC just decide the chief executive for us? So I think a simpler way to do it is for the MPCSC to come up with a blacklist to embargo certain candidates from taking part. So my question is, how do we solve the problem of the MPCSC violating the basic law? Thank you very much for the questions. As a Hong Kong citizen, everything should be based on the government's policy. I used to live in Shengshui, and there were a lot of hawkers on the bridges, and a few days ago, a hawker was selling sticky rice, and the hawker was arrested by FEHD. My question is, why aren't the parallel traders dealt with? Because they are affecting our lives. If the government's policy doesn't serve to benefit the majority of Hong Kong and instead serve to benefit the rich people, people with vested interests, the pro-establishment camp, etc., what happens with the ordinary people in Hong Kong? We are spending so much time in meetings discussing issues that would divide our society. Why don't the central government just appoint someone? There are more than 1 billion people. I think that's my response to Dr. Priscilla. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Lee seemed to be moving the yardsticks, and it accused the MPC for moving the yardsticks. This I don't agree with. As Dr. Leung said, at least we can make something happen by 2017. All along we have consultations and we have made a lot of fine adjustments. And today we all have a chance to speak out. So I don't think this is, there should be a blacklist. We shouldn't just complain at this stage. Complaining will get us nowhere. We should look forward, and we should make use of our experience and knowledge for the benefit of our future. So that's about it for this session. Once again, I'd like to thank all deputations and individuals for attending this open hearing session.